Hello, everyone. My name is Brennan Marr. That noise you're hearing is my ventilator, and welcome to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. Today's Thursday, so it's time for throwbacks. So today I'd like to talk about the Knights of the Old Republic video games. Before I do that, I just want to comment briefly on the Vanity Fair photo shoot for Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. But I only want to comment on one picture and one bit of information. We get a picture of the Knights of Ren, as well as confirmation that they will be in the movie. Now, who are the Knights of Ren? In The Force Awakens, Supreme Leader Snoke mentions that Kylo Ren is master of the Knights of Ren. And we see the Knights of Ren in Rey's Force vision. And that's all we got, and we haven't heard anything about them since. It is confirmed they are in The Rise of Skywalker. I don't really want to talk about a lot of the other pictures because I haven't really had time to study them, and I don't want to get too deep into trying to, delving too deeply and end up spoiling the movie for myself. So, the news that made me the most excited was the Knights of Ren. And we will see what they bring to the table. Now, let's jump to Knights of the Old Republic. In 1991, Dark Horse Comics started a series of comic books called Star Wars Dark Empire. In Star Wars Dark Empire were a couple of references to an ancient Sith Lord named Ulic Qel-Droma. Later, the same creators of Dark Empire started a line of comics called Tales of the Jedi, which told the story of the events 4,000 years before Star Wars, when a Jedi Knight named Ulic Qel-Droma fell to the dark side, became a Sith Lord, and there was a great war between the Jedi and the Sith. Years later, using the Tales of the Jedi comics as a guide to storytelling, or let me rephrase that, using the Tales of the Jedi comics as background information, BioWare, which is the video game company responsible for classics like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale, created the Knights of the Old Republic game, which is based or expands upon the story first presented in Tales of the Jedi by telling its own story but having some connections to Tales of the Jedi and combining that with the D20 D&D based role-playing game, Star Wars the Role-Playing Game, which is based on a 20-sided die system. So basically it's a D&D game in Star Wars, and it works magnificently. Knights of the Old Republic was released in 2003 and has become one of the greatest Star Wars video games of all time. You play a character. There are 3 classes to choose from, who goes on a quest to find a lost Jedi Knight named Bastila. Your character is customizable in many degrees, and it's a role-playing game. You make decisions, you engage in conversations. There's a turn-based combat system, and I gotta say, from a technical standpoint, it is one of the most brilliant games I've ever seen. And from a story standpoint, it's pretty good. I think that it does run into a large number of video game cliches, especially role-playing games, some of the choices you make. And it is overly simplistic in the choices you make. You can either go light side or dark side. And the way it seems to play in my mind is you either follow the story by doing the light side choices, or you do something mean and do dark side choices. Mean and petty, with no real meaning behind it. But, to be fair, these are just minor complaints. It's a great looking game, a great sounding game, great music, great characters. Some characters are more interesting than others, I'll admit. And you explore an interesting variety of Star Wars planets, both familiar and unfamiliar. The game was a huge hit, a bestseller, won several Game of the Year awards, and has gone down in history as one of people's favorite Star Wars games, and is often ranked among the best Star Wars Legends material. It is Legends. It is no longer canon. And the interest, I think, in that era is growing again. And it is the hope of many Star Wars fans that Benioff and Weiss, the guys behind Game of Thrones, will make their movies set in this time period. We don't know anything really about that right now. But just because Knights of the Old Republic is now Legends does not in any way diminish its brilliance. And then 2 years later, they released Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, which is my favorite of the two. I know it's an unpopular opinion. Now, unfortunately, the game was rushed in its development, so there was a good amount of content that was cut. Fortunately, in recent years, some game modders created what they call the restored content mod, which adds back in much of the removed story and finishes up some of the things that were never completed because of the game's rushed release. I would recommend finding the restored content mod if you are intent on playing Knights of the Old Republic 2. I like this game better than the first game because I think it's deeper, darker, it enriches the original story. It's kind of like what The Empire Strikes Back is to Star Wars. It takes the story in new directions. It adds layers of depth. It further explores the themes and the actions of some of the characters in the first game, particularly the Jedi Order, and really brings a new level of insight. The game was actually, BioWare handed it over to Obsidian Entertainment, which was made up of former BioWare employees. The lead guy, the bigwig on the game, is Chris Avellone, if I'm saying his name right. Chris Avellone was the leader when they were making Planescape Torment, which you may recall is, if you have not heard of this game, look it up. It's an underrated classic. In my opinion, one of the best games ever made. But both games, Planescape Torment and Knights of the Old Republic 2, share a similar style in the sense that they both examine very deep themes. They both subvert expectations in very interesting ways. They provide more interesting characters. And I believe that Knights of the Old Republic 2 has superior characters to the first game. As well as, I think, a superior story. And makes better use of giving you choices. But the choice to go dark side has more layers to it than in the first game. And even the light side choices have more layers to them. These two games are quite simply some of the best Star Wars content there is, period. With some people even ranking them alongside the movies in terms of just how much they add to the Star Wars universe. They are a lot of fans' favorite Star Wars content. I know of a couple of people who, to them, Knights of the Old Republic is on the same level as the movies in terms of story. I don't know if I necessarily agree, but I must say that both games are quite good. And if you have not had the chance to play them, check them out. You can find them on, I believe, Steam and Good Old Games. They're certainly, I played them to death. I absolutely love them. And I find myself going back many times. It's interesting because when you get a game where you've done it many, many times, the same story, same characters, same choices, and yet it sucks you back in. That's a sign of a good game. It's just a shame that we do not have any Star Wars games on that level nowadays. So those are my thoughts on Knights of the Old Republic. They're certainly nostalgic. And certainly, I think, some of the best content outside of the Star Wars movies. Thank you so much for tuning in to Page Turners They Were Not My Star Wars podcast. My name is Brendan Ryan. That noise you're hearing is my ventilator. And may the Force be with you.